blood.
That was the first thing Simi saw when she opened her eyes, the sharp smear of crimson across her trembling hands. Her baby's cry cut through the storm that raged outside, raw and desperate, like the sound of her own heart breaking. She clutched the infant closer, tears burning her eyes as she stumbled through the dark, rain-soaked alley behind the hospital. "Please," she whispered to the heavens, "don't let him find us." Her husband's voice still echoed in her ears, cruel and slurred. "You think you can leave me, Simi? You and that bastard child?" A flash of lightning illuminated her reflection in a puddle, her torn hospital gown, her swollen face, the deep purple bruise across her cheekbone. Every breath was agony, but she didn't stop running. She couldn't. Then headlights. A black car screeched to a halt before her, and before she could turn to flee, a man stepped out, tall, commanding, drenched in rain. His voice was sharp but calm.
Who hurt you?
Simi froze. His Mandarin-accented English wrapped around her name like a spell. "Please," she choked, clutching her baby. "He'll come for us." The man's eyes flickered toward the shadows, scanning for danger. And then, without another word, he took off his coat, wrapped it around her shoulders, and said, "Get in." Her instincts screamed, not to trust strangers. But her child whimpered, and something in his gaze, cold yet protective, made her obey. Inside the car, warmth swallowed her. She sat there, shaking, while the stranger leaned forward, murmuring a few words in rapid Mandarin to his driver. The car pulled away. Only then did she realize who he was. The news had once called him the Dragon of Shanghai, a billionaire who built empires and buried enemies with a single phone call.
Li Tian.
"What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Simi." He nodded once, his jaw tightening as if memorizing it. "And your baby?" Her throat ached. "Her name is Aaron." Something flickered behind his expression, pain, or perhaps recognition. But before she could ask, his phone rang. He answered in sharp tones, the words like shards of glass. Then he hung up and said, "Your husband won't find you again." Her breath caught. "How do you?" "I know what men like him do." His gaze dropped to the bruise on her face. "And I don't tolerate it." She wanted to thank him, but her voice broke before the words could leave her lips. Instead, she stared at the sleeping baby in her arms, feeling, for the first time in months, safe. They reached a massive glass mansion by the river, guarded by men in suits. Li Tian led her inside, his stride purposeful, his silence heavy. "You'll stay here tonight," he said, glancing at her shivering form. "There are clothes upstairs.
Food.
And no one will touch you." Simi looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Why are you helping me?" His eyes darkened. "Because once," he said, turning away, "no one helped the woman I loved." The words hung between them like thunder. That night, while Simi lay awake in a silk guest bed, her baby curled against her chest, she made a silent vow. To protect Aaron at any cost. But what she didn't know, what none of them did, was that the man who had saved her life would soon become the man who destroyed her heart. The storm had quieted by dawn, but the silence inside the mansion was worse. Li Tian stood by the window, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, watching the first pale light crawl over the city skyline. He hadn't slept, not after seeing her.
Simi.
The name still echoed in his mind like a song he shouldn't remember. He'd seen fear before, on men begging for mercy, on rivals who realized they were about to lose everything, but never like that. Not the kind that clung to her like smoke. She reminded him of someone he'd buried a long time ago. He turned when the door opened softly. His bodyguard, Chun, stepped in.
"She's awake."
Asked for milk for the baby. Li Tian nodded once. "Did you get anything on the husband?" Chun hesitated. "Enough." His name is Femi Okon. Ex-footballer turned nightclub owner. Heavy debts. Known for gambling and worse. Li Tian's jaw tightened. Worse. He's been under investigation for human trafficking. But he has friends in Lagos and connections in Macau.
Of course he did.
It was always the same kind of men. Power without discipline. Arrogance without restraint. The type who thought women were property. Handle it, Li Tian said flatly.
Chun blinked.
Handle it how, sir? Li Tian's voice dropped an octave. However you need to. A brief nod, and Chen vanished. For a moment, Li Tian stared at his reflection in the glass, the tailored black suit, the controlled expression, the faint scar cutting through his brow. The man staring back looked every bit the billionaire people feared. But beneath it, he could feel the old rage stirring, the kind that had made him ruthless. He walked down the hallway toward the guest wing. When he reached the door, he paused. Through the crack, he saw her, Simi, rocking her baby gently in her arms. Morning sunlight spilled across her face, catching the wet streaks of tears that hadn't yet dried. She looked fragile, but there was something else in her eyes now, defiance. Li Tian stepped inside quietly. She startled, clutching the child tighter. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "I know." Her voice was raw, tired, but steady. "You already saved me." He looked at her for a long time before replying. "Don't thank me yet." She frowned. "Why?" "Because the kind of man who beats a woman like that," he said slowly, "doesn't give up easily." Her face paled. "You mean?" "He'll come. But this time, he'll find me waiting." Simi's breath hitched. She wanted to ask who he really was, but she sensed the line she shouldn't cross. Then the baby stirred, and Li Tian's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "She's beautiful," he murmured. "She's all I have left." The words cracked something in him. He remembered the woman he couldn't save years ago, Simi, the fiancée who died in a car explosion meant for him. The one who'd told him she was pregnant the night before she died. Now, standing here with Simi and her child, that old guilt returned like fire. "I'll keep you both safe," he said finally, his voice like steel. "No matter what it costs." Simi blinked, confused.
Why?
"You don't even know us." He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, he let the truth show. "Because once," he said, "someone saved me, and I never repaid the debt." He turned to leave before she could ask more. But as the door closed behind him, Li Tian couldn't shake the feeling that saving Simi wasn't repayment, it was punishment. Because the more he looked at her, the more he felt something dangerous, something he'd sworn never to feel again. The first thing Simi noticed when she woke up was silence. Not the kind that made you feel safe, but the kind that made you aware of how fragile you were. The second thing she noticed was the room. It was nothing like the hospital or the cheap apartments she had lived in with Femi. This place was quiet, polished, and vast, with silk sheets, soft carpets, and a window so large it made her feel like she was staring at another world. She shifted carefully, glancing at the crib beside the bed. Her baby slept soundly, her tiny hand clutching a corner of the blanket. For a few moments, Simi just watched her. That little face was her anchor, her reason for breathing through the ache that still throbbed beneath her ribs where Femi's boot had landed. But then it hit her. She wasn't in the hospital anymore. Her body tensed. She remembered running. The slap. The road. The blood. The Mafia boss. Li Tian. She swallowed hard. The door creaked open, and her pulse spiked until she saw him standing there, dressed in a dark shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked impossibly composed, but his eyes, those cold, cutting eyes, softened when they landed on the baby. "You're awake," he said. His voice was calm, deep, dangerous, and gentle at the same time. "Where am I?" she asked, her fingers tightening around the blanket. "My home." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, sunlight catching the scar across his brow. "You needed protection. I didn't ask for it." "No," he said quietly, "but you needed it." Something in his tone made her throat tighten. Gratitude tangled with pride, fear mixed with a strange, unwanted safety. "I'm not weak," she whispered. "I never said you were." The air between them shifted. He turned, walked toward her, and crouched beside the bed, eyes level with hers. "You are strong enough to survive him. Strong enough to run. That's more than most." His words shouldn't have mattered, but they did. Simi's eyes burned, and she looked away quickly. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Li Tian's jaw tightened. I do. There was something in his voice, quiet, heavy, familiar. The tone of a man who had seen death too closely to fear it anymore. You're safe here, he said, softer now. I've posted guards. No one comes near this estate without my permission. She nodded, still holding her baby like a shield. And if I want to leave? His eyes flicked toward her. Then I'll take you wherever you want to go. But if you walk out that gate now, he paused, choosing his words. You might not survive the night. A shiver ran down her spine. She wanted to hate him for saying it, for being another man giving her limits. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no cruelty there. Only truth. He stood and handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was baby formula, new clothes, and a phone. For emergencies, he said. You're not a prisoner here, Simi. You're a guest. And then he left. For the first time in years, she cried. Not from fear, but from confusion. Why would a man like that, a man who could command armies with a phone call, stop his world for her and her child? Days passed. She began to heal. The bruises faded, though her heart hadn't. Li Tian barely spoke, but his presence was everywhere, in the way the guards bowed to her, in the way the house suddenly stocked diapers, milk, and tiny dresses. And sometimes, late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she would see him outside in the garden, standing under the moonlight with a cigarette between his fingers, staring at nothing. He looked like a man haunted by ghosts. Maybe that's why she didn't fear him, because she was haunted too. The rain had stopped 2 nights ago, but the house still carried its scent, damp earth, steel, and something softer that Simi couldn't name. The days had started blending together. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting the marble floor in gold. Her baby's laughter echoed faintly through the halls, a sound that didn't belong in a place like this, a place built by blood and power. And yet, Li Tian didn't seem to mind. He'd changed. Or maybe she was only now seeing the cracks beneath the legend. She would catch him sometimes, standing in the nursery doorway, pretending to check the security monitor, but his eyes always softened when he looked at her daughter. Sometimes he brought breakfast himself, a quiet ritual that made no sense for a man who had meant to do everything for him. Today, he came with a tray of dumplings and porridge, one hand in his pocket, his eyes unreadable. You should eat, he said simply. Simi looked up from where she sat by the crib. You really don't have to do this. Maybe not, he said, setting the tray down. But I want to. She blinked.
Want.
That word didn't sound right coming from his mouth. Do you ever smile? She asked before she could stop herself. His eyebrow arched slightly. Why? Because it's human. For a second, she thought she'd gone too far. But then, to her surprise, his lips curved just a little. Not a real smile, but close enough to make her heart flutter. That's better, she murmured. He shook his head. You're not afraid of me anymore. I was never afraid of you, she said softly. I was afraid of what would happen if I trusted you. The air between them thickened. Li Tian stepped closer, the distance shrinking until she could feel the heat of his body. His scent, smoke, cedar, and rain, filled her lungs. Trust is dangerous, he said quietly. Especially with men like me. I know. Her voice trembled. But sometimes, dangerous feels safer than the world I came from. He stared at her for a long time. Then he reached out, slow, careful, and brushed a loose curl from her face. His fingers lingered a second too long. Simi's breath caught. The touch burned through her. Not like fire, more like sunlight after years in the dark. Li Tian's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. You shouldn't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm not the man people say I am. Maybe you're not, she said. He exhaled sharply, stepping back as if distance could undo what just happened. You have no idea what I've done, Simi. She looked straight into his eyes. Then tell me. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might. But then he turned away, running a hand through his hair. You deserve peace. I don't know how to give that to anyone. Simi rose to her feet, clutching the edge of the table for balance. You already did. Their eyes locked again, a silent confession neither of them dared to speak. Then her baby cried softly in the crib, breaking the moment. Li Tian looked away first. "I'll check the security outside," he said, voice rougher than before. As he left, Simi pressed a hand to her chest. Her heart was racing, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Because for the first time since she'd met him, she realized something terrifying. She didn't just trust him. She wanted him. The night fell heavy over the mansion, like a warning. Thunder growled in the distance, lightning flashing through the curtains. Simi sat by the crib, humming softly to her baby. The melody trembled, like her hands. Something in her chest told her this calm wouldn't last. Downstairs, Li Tian moved like a shadow through his home. He had built this empire on precision, control, and blood, but tonight, something had shifted. For the first time in years, fear had returned. Not for himself, but for her. His phone buzzed once. A single message. "They've found her." He didn't waste a second. By the time the guards reached the gate, the attack had already begun. A black SUV tore through the rain, bullets flashing like angry sparks. Alarms screamed. Glass shattered. Li Tian's men fired back, the sound of gunfire echoing through the estate. Upstairs, Simi froze. Her baby stirred at the noise, crying out. Panic flooded her chest. Then the door burst open. It wasn't Li Tian. It was Femi's younger brother, Taupe, his face twisted with rage, rainwater dripping from his clothes. "You thought you could hide?" he snarled. "You took everything from my brother." Simi backed away, clutching her child. "Please, Taupe." He raised the gun. "He died because of you." But before he could fire, another voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Put it down." Li Tian stepped into the doorway, gun in hand, his expression cold as ice. Rain dripped from his hair, and his black shirt clung to his skin, streaked with blood from the fight outside. Taupe laughed bitterly. "You think you can protect her?"
You don't even know what she is.
"I know enough," Li Tian said quietly. "I know she's not yours to hurt." Taupe aimed the gun higher, finger trembling on the trigger, but he never got the chance to shoot. Li Tian's shot was silent, clean, final. The body dropped. Simi gasped, backing against the wall. The world spun around her, the smell of gunpowder, the sound of rain, her baby crying in her arms. Li Tian lowered his weapon slowly. "It's over." But the look in her eyes broke him. She wasn't afraid of the gun. She was afraid for him. He turned away, his voice rough. "You shouldn't have to see this." Li Tian, her voice stopped him. She stepped closer, heart pounding. "You saved me again, but you look like the one who's dying." He didn't answer. His shoulders were tense, his jaw locked. Finally, he said, "You don't belong in my world, Simi. You deserve peace. I can send you overseas, you and the baby. Somewhere safe. Somewhere clean." Her laugh was soft, bitter. "Peace? After everything?" She stepped closer until he finally met her gaze. "You showed me your demons, Li Tian. You didn't hide behind lies. My husband wore suits and smiles while destroying me inside. You let me see you bleed." The words hung between them like lightning. "You think you're the monster," she whispered, "but you're the only man who's ever made me feel safe." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time in years, he let the armor fall. When she touched his face, he closed his eyes. "You shouldn't love me," he said softly. Too late. Their lips met, not with passion at first, but with relief, grief, and every broken piece of trust rebuilt in that single touch. When they finally pulled apart, Simi smiled faintly through her tears. "So what now?" Li Tian glanced at the crib where the baby had drifted back to sleep. "Now we live," he said. "For her. For us." 3 years later, the sun rose over the cliffs of Busan, turning the sea gold. A small villa overlooked the water, filled with laughter and the scent of breakfast. Simi stood on the balcony, her baby, now a lively toddler, tugging at her dress. Behind her, Li Tian wrapped his arms around her waist, his once cold eyes softened with warmth. "You're quiet," he murmured. "Just thinking." she said, leaning into him. About how far we came. He smiled. You brought me back to life. And you gave me freedom, she replied. The wind carried their laughter over the waves. For a man who had once ruled by fear and a woman who had lived in chains, they had built something no one could destroy. Not vengeance, not guilt, but love, forged in fire and reborn in peace.